Did you know that blind people in the 19th century contributed enormously to the dissemination and popularization of songs and musical pieces, including flamenco? Probably you didn't know it because they never appeared in the histories of flamenco. However, their participation was crucial for flamenco to be what it is today. In episode 16 of the podcast Forgotten Sounds of Flamenco, we will remember their contribution and serve as a tribute to the significant relevance that blind people had in the history of flamenco.
Sounds that once were listened. Sounds that once were enjoyed. Sounds that once were danced. Sounds relegated to oblivion. And yet, there is still something we can do for them. Let us summon them. Let us summon them.
Welcome to the podcast Forgotten Sounds of Flamenco. My name is José Miguel Hernández Jaramillo, and I invite you to enroll in this journey through the sounds, stories, spaces, and people that were part of the 19th century flamenco. Hello, how are you? In this episode, I'm going to talk about an extraordinary subject for me that I have been dedicated to the popular music from past times research, including flamenco. Because when we talk about how music is transmitted through different geographical places and about how some songs become popular, we usually refer to phenomena such as artistic tours, movements of people due to commercial activities, or migrations, who take their musics and songs from one place to another. But rarely do we refer to another actors who also contributed to the dissemination and popularization of musical repertoires. Among them, we can mention artists and musicians who played music from town to town. Within this group, I will focus on today's episode, especially blind people, to whom we owe much of the matter of dissemination and popularization of repertoires. Today, fortunately, much progress has been made and blind people can have access to practically all professions. But in the 19th century, there were different opportunities. Music was how blind people used to work, walking the streets of the cities, singing a cappella, or accompanying themselves with an instrument such as the guitar, violin, flute, clarinet, or sanfonia. And what repertoire did they usually have? Well, according to the documents, they used to play the most fashionable songs. Some references tell us that if a song was successfully in a theater, it has already been incorporated into the repertoire of traveling musicians after a few days. This fact is very important for several reasons. The first one is that they allowed the entire population of the cities to know about the most popular songs on operas or zarzuelas, and not only for people who went to the theaters. This was tremendously effective. Repeated listening of a piece of music contributed enormously to its popularity. This fact was also very important because it allows researchers to determine which melodies were the most popular at any given time based on the repertoire that blind people performed. If they sang a particular song, it was a sign that it was well known by most of the population. And among those songs, we find many flamenco songs, precisely the most popular at any given time. For example, if we go back to 1883, a text published in the press make it clear that the most popular flamenco song at that time, the malagueñas and the peteneras, were part of the regular repertoire of blind people. I will read this fragment. We leaned against the wall of a house, rested for a few moments, recovered somewhat, and began to sing the tenor ballad of the first act of Favorita. A blind man who did not sing peteneras or malagueñas immediately caught the attention, and not a few, observing the mastery with which he was overcoming the difficulties of the work, whispered their surprise and let some coins in the hat that he hung on his arm. Notice how it draws people's attention that a blind person does not sing peteneras or malagueñas. This is corroborated in many other documentary references from that period, such as an illustration of a blind man singing that was published in 1989 in La Semana Cómica in Barcelona, including the following stanza. I translate the lyrics. I have two kisses in my soul, they don't leave me. I, that of not having believed you when you started to cry. This stanza, two kisses I have in my soul that don't leave me, was one of the characteristic stanzas of the petenera at that time. Therefore, although the song's name is not mentioned, we can guess that it is a petenera. About the abundant presence of blind people on the streets of the cities, we have another very evident reference in a text by Juan Mora from 1915, entitled Música Madrileña, Music from Madrid, which says the following. Madrid is a town where music constitutes something like a vice. Its inhabitants, who came from all the cities of Spain, well, it is known that the population of Madrid only has 17% natives of Madrid itself. They make the songs and airs from their regions heard at all hours. From an open balcony, the notes of a Basque solfico descend while a menegilda hums some malagueñas, and the organ stands as with the rain of notes from the classic mazurka from Madrid. The music emerged in Madrid from everywhere. If this were not enough, there is an orchestra of blind men on every street. Well, as you can see, the text says there is an orchestra of blind people on every street. It may be an exaggeration. Still, in any case, the abundance of these musicians on the streets of Madrid is inferred. Well, we are going to listen to one of these pieces that may have been heard in the streets of the Spanish cities. It is contained in a collection of scores whose title in English is Echoes from Spain, Popular Songs and Dances, published around 1871 in Paris and containing popular music arranged for piano, which was compiled and transcribed by Paul Lacombe and José Puig y Alzubide. This work includes several flamenco pieces, including a malagueña, and the following texts appear in the notes of this score. I will read it translated from French. The following piece was transcribed faithfully dictated by three blind beggars. This malagueña can be considered as a exceedingly outstanding example of this strange and rare genre which belongs more to Africa than to Europe, more to the Moors than to the Spaniards, but which, in its apparent monotony, achieves fascinating and indescribable effects. In addition to the identification of the malagueñas with music from the north of Africa, very typical of this time of Alhambrism, and the exoticization of Andalusian music, the mention that it is transcribed in an absolutely faithful way to the interpretation of the three blind people is striking. Well, in an exercise of imagination, and even though this sound is arranged for piano, we are going to travel to those streets of Madrid, Barcelona, Cádiz or Seville to listen to how these three musicians could have played their malagueñas. The writer Adolfo Llanos published an article entitled The Spanish Blind in the newspaper El Imparcial from Madrid in 1883. when he narrates the suffering due to the number of street musicians in Madrid, that in opinion of the author they sang very badly. The exciting thing is that he tells us some of the musical pieces he heard. Adolfo Llanos said, "Taking as my observation a street in the town, one of the least crowded, I have seen the following blind people pass by in 3 hours, in the company of the subsequent calamities." And then he presents a list of 26 musical pieces performed by those people, including some flamenco such as peteneras, soleás or malagueñas. Well, let me tell you that another characteristic job for blind people was selling chapbooks on the streets. They consisted of printed sheets, generally with a fold in the middle, so that 4 sides were obtained, containing stanzas of the most famous music at the moment. These stanzas could be just like those of the song or versions of all kinds, political criticism, love and heartbreak, stories, etc. These chapbooks were also a tremendous musical dissemination mechanism. By the way, they also help us researchers to know if a piece of music was known by the population, since in these chapbooks there is no written music, only the lyrics, so that the buyer can sing it with the music they are supposed to know already. I'd like to end this episode by mentioning that some blind people were significant musicians in that period, also in flamenco. One of them was the guitarist from Jaén, Antonio Jiménez Manjón, a true virtuoso of both the 11th string and 6th string guitar. Antonio Jiménez Manjón left us some flamenco compositions such as Soleá or Malagueñas, for example. May this episode serve as a tribute to all those who, with their music, make happy to other people, who made a job as novel and challenging as music, especially when it is done on the streets, where it is very cold or very hot sometimes. These people will never appear in the histories of music or flamenco. Still, they played a significant role in spreading the music. I hope you liked this episode, and if so, please share it with your friends or family. These small actions make our community grow so much every month. I hope you had a great time and see you here in 2 weeks.